Hello there. The City of Hull could become the first area in the UK to trial a universal basic income, an income you don't actually have to work for. But is that really all there is to it? Firstly, as ever, please kick that YouTube algorithm up the backside by giving this video a big fat like. And I do generally upload new videos every day, so please check back regularly. Oh, and only 10 days to Brexit Day, so into single digits tomorrow. Now, a cross-party group of Hull City councillors has voted to apply to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sajid Javid, for permission to test a universal basic income, or UBI, for its residents. The idea of UBI is that every single resident, from child to pensioner, gets a weekly payment at a set level for everyone, regardless of any other income or their circumstances. But it replaces any other form of state support and welfare. The amount per week has been mooted at between £50 and £100 for most people, but with maybe £175 for pensioners to replace the state pension and £40 for children, which would in all likelihood be given to the parents, of course. This would not only remove the need for an extremely complex welfare system, it would also simplify the state pension and also allow parents to get child benefit for every child. That's free money for all that never has to be paid back and never has to be earned. So everyone from the unemployed to the nurse, to the university lecturer, to the self-employed plumber, to the millionaire CEO and the multi-millionaire singer or football player would also all get it. So who's paying for it then? Well, that would be the state, of course, or more accurately, one of either the taxpayers, government borrowing, or the Treasury printing press, or more likely a combination of all those three, depending on the prevailing circumstances at the time. But as no other benefits are being paid, then it could quite easily be almost cost neutral, or so the thinking goes. And presumably this payment would be made to all residents, regardless of work history, with residency being the only qualifier. It would also have to be index linked to something, one presumes. Now, this possibly extra free money could give people more choices in their life, and it is the stuff of dreams and science fiction, much of which becomes science fact later on down the line. It was always thought that the Industrial Revolution would lead to more mechanisation and therefore more time for workers to relax and divert their work into making a better life for themselves through study, culture and hobbies and the like. Not sure it's worked out like that so far though. It seems that the machine, especially the computer, has actually multiplied the workload and introduced information overload. But there may come a time when the Gene Roddenberry Star Trek vision of money being a thing of the past in a world where everyone works tirelessly to improve themselves comes to pass. Although I think many people would be looking to binge-watch box sets while expanding their waistlines through fast foods rather than expanding their minds through learning. Then, of course, there's the Fritz Lang Metropolis version of a huge underclass toiling to feed the machines while a select elite few benefit. Now that one sounds quite familiar, doesn't it? But I digress. Now, a lot of people may think that those hard-hearted Tories in government won't go for giving everyone money for nothing, even though Tory Hull councillors did actually vote for the trial. But I would ask, why wouldn't they? Just think, if there's only one payment and no other benefits, then it becomes a competition between Labour and the Tories on who can provide the largest level of universal basic income. So, apart from the NHS, all those squabbles over the likes of child benefit, winter fuel allowances and bedroom taxes fall away. And the Tories might well feel that they can make the argument that only a strong Tory economy can keep the UBI ship afloat. So I'm not sure they'd be as averse to it as some think. So it would be a payment for all, replacing all the other specialist payments, or at least that's the theory, but more on that in a minute. But there are a few issues to also bear in mind. Firstly, with the trial itself. Because it is area specific, you could find Mr. and Mrs. Smith at 17 Acacia Avenue receiving it, while Mr. and Mrs. Brown at 19 Acacia Avenue don't. That'll ruffle a few feathers. To be a proper trial, it would have to be properly universal across the whole area, no allowances and no exceptions at all. And that might create winners and losers, with the losers getting less money than they do today. Then there's the issue of house prices and rents in the area. They will have to be closely monitored to see what impact this free money sloshing around the area has. And that goes for retail prices as well. And how about pay? Will employers be tempted to reduce wages as low as legally allowed? You bet they will. I also think that some, if not all of those concerns will manifest themselves at a national level as well, especially where rent and pay are concerned if this thing is rolled out across the nation. Should this go ahead, I think that there would be a relatively swift realignment of all the things I've just mentioned, and a new equilibrium would be found that is not too different from that of today. What I'm saying is that I don't think this would be extra money for anyone. After a few years, when the dust had settled and then looked at on a proportional basis, it would just end up as people overall getting what they were getting today, with the only difference being the source of the money. And I reckon that would be the case even if the government set up a perpetual money printing programme to pay for it. The only benefit as I see it would be that you would get child allowance, job seekers allowance and a pension without having to apply for them. And that's something borne out by Thomas Moraga, who was part of an UBI trial in Finland. Writing in The Guardian, Thomas said that UBI hasn't changed his life or made him rich, but simply, in money terms, my life has not changed at all. However, the psychological effects of this human experiment have been transformative. I vastly prefer basic income to a benefit system fraught with complicated forms, mandatory courses and pointless obligations. Before the trial, the risk of losing unemployment benefits and the cumbersome process of reapplying for them were an obstacle to accepting small job assignments. The bureaucracy involved made accepting some not worthwhile or simply too risky. So I don't think it would result in topping up your wage. If anything, it might tend over time to push your wage down towards the minimum. But now back to the concept of the universal basic income replacing the welfare system. Fat chance. How many of you out there really think that any future socialist government would not want to reintroduce the welfare system on top of the universal basic income? Of course they would. And why? Because the thought of the uber rich, that is anyone on more than the minimum wage, the thought of them also benefiting every time they put UBI up for the downtrodden workers would just melt their minds. And then there's the really big one. If you thought that the NHS was a political football, then with UBI you ain't seen nothing yet. Because everyone gets it every week. The Tories and Labour would be forced into a battle at every single election over who would pay out the most UBI. And that would include pledges about putting ever more complex mechanisms in place to ensure greedy landlords and employers and the like don't screw their tenants and workers out of their UBI with higher rents and lower wages, etc. And I won't even go into who would qualify in the terms of those coming into the country, legal or otherwise. And how about those that are most likely to need it to stay alive, the vulnerable and the homeless, i.e., those who are least likely to have a bank account or a means of safely storing that money? They would become targets for the callous and ruthless thieves, because they would know that their targets now all had access to money on a weekly basis. And those same ne'er-do-wells would also be looking at all sorts of fraudulent schemes to try and milk the system. And politicians would always be looking to use it for their own political gain. So in my view, it's not a universal basic income that we need. It's a situation where mechanisation has got to the point where a medium of exchange, that's money, is no longer required. A situation where people know that they can get all the food, clothes, travel or whatever they need on demand without having to slave over a job they detest to get those things. But would that end up with a human race that worked to find its true potential, or a self-destructive drive towards oblivion? I would like to think the former, but... Anyway, if you want to hear more from me, please don't forget to subscribe and also press that little bell or you won't get any notifications. And if you want to see more of me, buy a mug with my mug on it. Anyway, what do you think about all of this? Please share and comment, and thank you for watching.